dignity, whatever achievements I'm able to realize, ultimately end up reinforcing the authority of those who define the criterion of value to define the criterion of value. And so I end up ultimately sort of working against myself. If I lose, I lose. Even if I win, however, I might lose. Because what I end up doing is reinforcing the power of those who have defined me to define me. And this is one of the reasons why the very invisibility of suffering is more, I think, insidious than those very visible means by which we inflict pain and deprivation on others. Now, in the context of America, it has long been thought that suffering was some sort of exclusive preserve of black folks and minorities. In fact, the very term suffering itself, when it's mentioned in the context of any kind of social political discussion, it usually connotes or connotates either non-whites or perhaps we should say now even off-white people. I think, however, that the present state in which we exist affords us the opportunity, and by that I mean some of the events that have taken place, and from our perspective as a Muslim, certainly since the events of 9/11, I think we're in a position to see through this whole notion that suffering, certainly in terms of normalized domination, is something that only black folks experience. I think, however, what is important about this is that to the extent that white folks and others are drawn into regimes of normalized domination, I think that tends to reinforce the degree to which black people suffer as a result of the false definitions of value that permeate our society. But I think it's also important for us to note that black folks are not the only ones who have been inducted or who struggle with the whole issue of being inducted into regimes of false ideals. And I think that by way of examples, I think that right now as a nation we are sort of obsessed with the issue of security and among other issues. And I think that in the name of security, we can be convinced to do a lot of things, to accept a lot of things, to endorse a lot of things. And I think that, again, if we think about our reality as Americans who live right here in the United States of America, who don't live in Afghanistan, who don't live in Iraq, who don't live anywhere overseas, but who live right here. If we consider the following, maybe we'll get a sense of what I'm trying to get at here. I think the worst year of American casualties in Afghanistan was 2007. And if I'm not mistaken, there were 315 American casualties in Afghanistan in 2007. Now, of course, Afghanistan is a war zone. They're fighting a real war there. That includes engagement, drones, the whole nine. 315 casualties. It was mentioned that I'm originally from Philadelphia, and if you're from Philadelphia, you understand that once from Philadelphia, always from Philadelphia. So I have a visceral attachment to the city. Does anybody know how many murders there were in the city of Philadelphia in 2007? Over 400. Does anybody know how many murders there were in LA in 2007? About 389. How about Detroit? How about Chicago? If we are concerned about security, about the security of our lives, and we are living in a country that produces upwards of 17,000 murders a year, how can we justify investing the resources that we invest in a place like Afghanistan versus the kind of resources that we invest in our cities? And point that I'm making here is not simply to point out the unfairness of this, but the fact that many of those who support this very distribution of our resources honestly believe that they are promoting their own interests in terms of securing their own safety. They honestly believe that by winning a war in Afghanistan, we will be safer in the city of Philadelphia, or in Detroit, or in Chicago. Or maybe it's that I'm naive and maybe they really don't care. But I'm not that old to be that cynical yet. So I'll chalk it up to a false ideal. Now, I think that as I try to come to a close here, with regard to the role of religion in this whole business of suffering, and I mean suffering in the sense of normalized domination, and let me speak from the perspective of Islam in particular, I think that it's real important for us to know that clearly intelligent people who are highly educated, can be drawn into regimes of domination that lead them to support ideas, to support values, to support policies, to support perceptions that are inconsistent with their own thinking, with their own set of values. And in that regard, I think it's really important for us as a nation to begin to think about how we can arrive at ways of penetrating the pre-conscience. Because clearly our minds are working in the interest of values, sentiments, and sensibilities that precede our faculties of reason. And they are directing our faculties of reason in this, that, or the other way. And until we penetrate the pre-conscience and rearrange the values on the basis of which we act in society, our reason will continue to serve the values that are implanted or manipulated by the powers that be. For me, this is the real role of religion. And it is the real role of Islam as a religion. Islam as a religion, from its inception, has fundamentally been about not the business of domination or conquest, but ultimately the business of empowering individuals to be masters in the sense of having some control over the pre-conscience, over the passions that animate and direct them as individuals. And I think that while Islam has of recent years hit a bump in sort of modern times, so much so that when we think about religion in the modern world, certainly when we think about religion as a problem, we tend to think about Islam. For me, however, I think it's really important to note that people, black, white, and others, in societies all over the world, especially in our own, are suffering. And not suffering from sort of direct physical acts of the infliction of pain and psychological suffering, but suffering in the sense of being denied the incentives to revolt against that which deep down inside they know is wrong. And I think that until the pre-conscience can be rehabilitated, this kind of suffering is going to perpetuate itself. And for Islam, like any other religion, if it is to avoid the biggest threat to religion in any society, which is not persecution, but it is apathy born of irrelevance, until Islam can get back to its primary and fundamental message of empowering people to be masters over the pre-conscience, then I think that Islam may meet a fate similar to other religions that we've seen come into crisis in the modern world. I'll stop there, and I look forward to the comments of my dear brother, Cornel West.
First, it's an honor, privilege, and blessing to be here in this new space. This is a magnificent space, so let's just give the space a hand. Carl Field Space, led by the visionary and courageous leader, our dear sister, Makiba Clay. Give Sister Clay a hand. She's doing a wonderful job, wonderful staff. Brothers, I deeply appreciate the work that you're doing. One of the reasons why I wanted to be here is because it's so very important that we not only accent but try to expand the crucial presence of brothers and sisters who are followers and actors of Islam, that all the lies told about Islam, all of the misperceptions, all of the misunderstandings that are perpetrated day in and day out in the mainstream press, given what's going on in the world, in the Middle East, Asia, United States. It's very important here at Princeton that we have a robust conversation, that we have a critical engagement with the very rich and deep legacy of towering figures, philosophers, theologians, activists who represent Islam at its best, Islam at its medium, Islam at its worst. Same is true for Judaism, same is true for Christianity, same is true for Hinduism, any religion. And as you know, we still have a long way to go to come to terms with the complexity of Islamic civilizations over time and space, going all the way back to 8th century up to this very moment. And so I see this moment as an example of Princeton trying to meet that challenge. And I am so glad to be in conversation with my very dear brother. We've had conversations at the American Political Science Association. He was kind enough to be one of the commentators of my book, Democracy Matters, and we had a wonderful time. I'm talking about the distinguished professor at the University of Michigan, my dear brother Sherman Jackson. Give him a hand again. Give him a hand. Appreciate you, brother. I'm blessed to have you here. I'm not going to be long, but I want to open this up. First, as was noted, at the metaphysical level of how do we talk about the ultimate meaning of suffering? What is the fundamental significance of suffering? I would argue that we really don't know. I don't care if you're Christian, Islam, Hindu, or whatever. I think there's a sense in which it's a mystery why particular babies die at 1, why particular people drop dead at 35. It's a mystery why certain dogs choose to kill certain folk early in the morning. I used to have a paper out and the dog was on me every morning, so I was glad somebody was praying for me. But I could have died. And that was no political, social, cultural significance. It's just Negro bitten died. Which is to say what? Which is the problem of Dostoevsky that he raised in the Brothers Karamazov. The surds and the absurds that create black holes in our canopies of meaning that we attempt to impose on the world. There is no theoretical resolution of it whatsoever. I am a Christian because I'm willing to look those black holes in the face and still make a leap of faith in the midst of that mystery. And I'll listen to my Islamic brothers and sisters, how you all try to work that out. Because I don't understand why Haiti over and over again is attacked by nature. I understand French imperialism. I understand American indifference to the grand free republic of Toussaint L'Ouverture. But I don't understand those darn hurricanes over and over and over again hitting those precious brothers and sisters, those priceless brothers and sisters, year after year after year. You see? Which means what for me then, anytime you talk about suffering, which is a species of the problem of evil, undeserved suffering, unnecessary misery, unwarranted pain, you're talking about the conclusion of an Aristotelian practical syllogism which says, what kind of life are you going to lead? What kind of action are you going to take? What kind of courage are you going to exercise? This is where I fundamentally agree with my dear brother, Professor Jackson. In the end, the problem of suffering has to do with, one, mustering the courage to try to understand the context that allows this suffering to flower and flourish.